List time again. uh, not quite caught up after my travels, and I just fancied doing a top 10 list. This time of my favorite modern horror films, except it's actually a top 13. Good number for horror, and 10 just wasn't quite enough to cover it. These are all recent films, though, so here we go. Right, so, like I say, these are my favorites of the moment. I might make a totally different, well, not totally different list, but a different list in another month, in another year. This is just a snapshot of some favorites from right now. Um, make of them what you will, and if there are any that you haven't seen, this is a good chance to go and look them up. Good little push to go and look them up. Um, they are pretty much all available fairly easily. Streaming, Blu ray, DVD. Only one of them that's not available to my knowledge on any of those, except that it is actually for free on YouTube. But I've saved it for last. It's an unusual entry into this list because it's a very short film, but I just loved it. I love it, so I had to include it. It's such a great little film. Um, so starting at again, no particular order, but first on my list is Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele, released 2017. I'm sure most of you know this film. I'm not being particularly adventurous in a lot of these choices. They're just films I really love. But if you have not seen get out of here. Go watch it. It is such a clever, such an interesting film. It tells the story of a young photographer named Chris, who is black, and he is going for the weekend with his white girlfriend, Rose, to meet her family. Only it's not quite as straightforward as it seems. I won't say anything more than I'm going to be very spoiler free on all of this, or at least as spoiler free as possible. Um, and that's for all of these films, of course, because they are all from within the last, most of them within the last 26 years. One of them is 27 years old. But that's still within my sort of, it's not fair to give spoilers quite yet. So now I will say, though, with Get Out, um, it's kind of a modern version, gender swapped version of Bluebeard with racial themes and overtones. If you don't know Bluebeard, this is actually a fairy tale, and there are lots of different versions of it. The basics of it is a young woman marries a wealthy older man. Um, he seems very nice at first, but he has to go away, and he says one thing: while I'm away, you can go anywhere in the castle or the palace or whatever that you like, except you can't go in this room, and it's locked. And he leaves, and of course she becomes increasingly obsessed with going into that one room she's not supposed to go into. And when she finally does find a way to get into it, she discovers the heads of all of his previous wives. This is naturally very distressing for her, and she, in most versions, has to call upon someone on the outside, her brothers or, some other family or someone else, to help her escape. She can't get away on her own for various reasons, so she needs help. And while obviously Get Out has a young man at the center of it, there are a lot of those same themes in this, to include the rescue from the outside, and that's all I'll say. They wasn't going to have that rescue at the end, apparently, in the original version that was planned for the film, and I believe shot as well for the film. But they went with a more optimistic ending. Maybe not the most realistic, but certainly a more optimistic and satisfying ending. And Yeah, there's so much in this film that is really just so smart, so clever. It's what you expect from Jordan Peele. It's razor sharp. It's in so many instances extremely funny, but when it becomes tense and creepy and scary, it is really like, oh gosh, and there's that sort of, what would I do? And then of course it's if I were in his shoes, what would I do? How would I get out? Would I get away? And just all the kinds of little layering in this film. For instance, at the very beginning of the film, the music that we hear, which is, I believe, in Swahili, it is a warning from the ancestors to get out, to go, to run, to get away. Which, I did not know the first time I saw it, not being someone who speaks Swahili, but I did in looking up some stuff about this film, because I did used to teach this film on my feminist film theory module. We looked at it in terms of gender, race, and class, and things like intersectionalism and so forth. And, plus it's just such a great film. And yeah, so I love Get Out. I'm going to stop just right there. I don't want to say too much about any of these films because I want you to go and see them for yourself. But this is, I won't pick a favorite. I won't. It's not number one on my list because it's my favorite. I don't do favorites very well. I never have been very good at choosing favorites. But this is a film that I will stop what I'm doing and watch no matter what, no matter how many times I've seen it. And it's such a rich text that there are always new little details that one sort of spots as you watch it. So go find it, go watch it. Number 2 on the list, The Others. This is directed by Alejandro Amenabar. It's from 2001, starring, of course, Nicole Kidman. And, I mean, okay, this film has been around for, gosh, a quarter of a century now, 25 years. So I'm maybe a teeny bit more willing to be a little bit more spoilery on this, but I don't want to give away the twist, because in a sense, once you've seen this whole film, and there are a couple of films like this on this list that are a couple of films that are like this, where the first time you watch the film, you're watching it with one understanding. And then at the end, when you find out the twist of, and the truth of the situation that the characters find themselves in, the next time you watch this film, you see it from a completely different perspective. And it's almost like it becomes a new film in so many ways, because your understanding of what's happening absolutely flips. Now, The Others, as I say, stars Nicole Kidman. And in this, she is living on one of the Channel Islands in the final part of, or just after the Second World War. And she lives alone. Well, she lives alone with her children in this great big house. Her husband has been off fighting the war. And if you're not aware of this, the Channel Islands off the coast of Britain, off the coast of, sort of between England and France, this was the only part of the UK to fall under Nazi occupation. And there have been a number of books and films in recent years that depict this occupation. That includes, documentaries as well as fictional feature films and such. But it's a very undertold, undershared story in a lot of respects, particularly on sort of larger, sort of mainstream cinema. And we don't go into the occupation much, just it's part of the background that is happening in this film. But it does mean that life on the Channel Islands was particularly badly impacted. But this family at the center of it, they are in a particularly unusual position. So Grace, who's played by Nicole Kidman, she's living alone with her 2 children, Anne and Nicholas, and they're living in this huge house, and it's just right after the end of the Second World War. I think it's sort of 1945, but the war is over. She's hoping for her husband's return. She hasn't heard from him in a long time. And all of a sudden, all the servants are gone. And she depends greatly on her servants, in large part because, not because she, I mean, for one thing, it is a house that is very large and you need servants to help take care of it, because you need as many, all hands on deck kind of thing. But in her case in particular, it's extra challenging because her children, who are healthy, intelligent children, sound and all otherwise, they have a condition which makes them incredibly photosensitive. And this is a real condition. I'll put the name of it on screen. And if you have this, any sunlight at all that hits your skin blisters you. It's not just, if you're out for too long and you get, I'm sure there are degrees of severity with this, just like there are with most things. But if you have this condition, you cannot go out in the sun. I don't think really any sunlight in some cases. It can blister you badly, dangerously. It's incredibly toxic to you in a sense. It's not just like a bad sunburn for most of us. It's terrible. Okay. And so the children have to live their lives in darkness, and the house has to be kept, or at least any rooms that the children are in, have to be kept in constant darkness with light no brighter than sort of lamp light. And we're talking, sort of like oil lamp light, candle light, that kind of thing in these kids' case. So she really, and they're very young children as well still. So she is particularly dependent on others for help in sort of managing the household. And she wakes up, all the servants are gone. She tries to put out an advertisement for for new servants, because she's like, I don't know what happened to them all. They just woke up one morning and they'd all left. And 3 servants show up at the house, and they didn't even know she'd been advertising. They just came, they say, looking for work. And she, but she immediately hires them, and things are not good. And she becomes increasingly convinced. At first, she's very reluctant to believe this, but things happen that make her begin to think more and more that there is a haunting in the house. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say for now. Except that it is, once you've seen the whole film, again, you watch it again, and there's so many scenes, particularly one where she's sort of struggling with the door to the music room. That's the one that always really stands out in my head, where it's just like, that is you see it totally differently. So, yeah, The Others, 2001. I love that film. I've loved it ever since I first saw it in the cinema. All right, number 3, very recent film, Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler, 2025. All right, Sinners tells the story of 2 identical twin brothers, played by the same actor, Michael B. Jordan. The brothers are Smoke and Stack, which is hilarious. It's set in the 1930s, early 1930s. So, depression, segregation, so forth. And the brothers have been living up north, Chicago, I think it is. And they have made a decent amount of money. And they've decided to come back to their little hometown, their little community. And it is quite a rural, small community, and open up a juke joint, basically. And, a place for the people of color of their community, just a place to gather, to have fun. They've managed to get hold of I think it's an old factory of some sort. So, a big, essentially open, blank space that they can very quickly put their mark onto. They gather up, people that they know to help them, and they put on a big party. And they've got a young cousin who is an incredibly gifted guitarist, musician, and he's going to be their central act. And in particular, the scene in the film where he performs at the club that they've created, the juke joint, is such a fantastic scene involving essentially, the ancestors, but also the descendants, and the sort of the magic and the timelessness of all great music, regardless of its genre, regardless of the sort of markers that denote it of a particular time period in sort of terms of style and so forth. Just great music, great musicianship, that sort of thing. But of course, again, this is the South, it's the early 30s. The Klan is around, as in the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. Trouble is, sort of looming on the horizon. But before that can be a problem, these strange people show up. Three white people who show up wanting to come in, play music, join the fun. And there's something very odd about them. And I don't think I'm spoiling it too much here, just a teeny tiny spoiler. Although it's of course important for the film, it comes early enough in, and I think this is widely known enough that I'm not really ruining the film for anybody, that it turns out that these three strange folk who have shown up are vampires. And, a siege of these vampires ensues, with the humans inside having to, protect themselves and do battle. Sort of a little bit along the lines of a film like From Dusk Till Dawn, but, with a number of interesting twists. I won't say much more than that. Every accolade this film got, it deserved wholeheartedly. Incredible acting, incredible music, and another one that again rewards rewatching because of all the little things that it's so easy to miss when everything about a film is new the first time you're watching it. I almost never, unless I really dislike a film, I never just watch a film once. I am someone who thinks there's a great deal of value in repeat viewing, because you do pick up all these extra little details that you would never have seen while you're first trying to absorb everything about the film. But yeah, Sinners is fantastic. Everything about it is fantastic. Right. Number 4. The Conjuring. This is, of course, directed by James Wan, 2013. Now, I'm going to admit to you fully and freely, I enjoyed all the Conjuring films. Loved them all. Do I think any of them are perfect films? No. But they are effective in all kinds of ways. And the first time I saw The Conjuring in 2013 in the cinema, I mean, it really did creep me out. Now, the ending of the film, the climactic part of the ending of the film anyway, it's not, to me, that's the least best, that's the least good thing about the film. I didn't hate it. And certainly the first time I watched it in a full cinema of people who are really, really enjoying it, that does matter. And you watch films a little differently under those circumstances. You perceive films differently, sort of in that audience in a cinema like that. It is a different experience from watching it on your own. And so I did enjoy it more. Over time, the ending, the climax at the end, toward the end, has bothered me more and more. But the rest of the film, it has some wonderfully creepy touches of, the thing, the sort of whipping around the corner, or the strange noise, or, just all those little subtle things. And then, of course, this is a film that I wouldn't say it introduces Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens were, of course, very famous in their lifetimes. They've both passed away now, although Lorraine Warren does have a very small cameo toward the beginning of The Conjuring, and was on set, I believe, for a lot of that film. But, I think possibly there were people, especially maybe younger generations, who weren't aware of the Warrens, and this film has kind of introduced them to the Warrens in some ways. Um, and they are very much the heroes of the Conjuring films as a franchise. It centers around them, and but the Conjuring, it, when we start to really see things through Lorraine's eyes, because she is a medium, she's psychic, she has the ability to see and hear things that others might not. That is such a creepy scene in particular. And then, of course, there's the way that the mother of the family at the center of the film, played by Lily Taylor as Carolyn Perrin. Carolyn's experiences in the house, she is a housewife, so she's there quite a lot. It's, her dream in many respects to have this great big old house for herself, her husband, and their five daughters. And, so they've got plenty of room, and it's out in the country and all of that. And she is the one who in so many ways experiences some of the really creepiest aspects of the haunting. And of course the scene that's used in the trailer for the film, where she's locked, trapped inside the cellar, and she's up on the cellar stairs, and she's only got a few matches, and just by the light of the single match, we see those hands come out, next to her head and clap from behind her. And it is so creepy, that. And just the way that the sound and the cinematography and all is done in this film, as well as the acting. We've got some really good actors in this film. Yeah, it's so creepy. It's so creepy. And if the ending had not been quite so fantastical, which I know is a weird thing to say about a film like this, but if the ending had not been quite so over the top, I think that in some ways this film would have worked even better. But even with that, this is still a great film, and I do recommend the other films in the Conjuring franchise, particularly The Conjuring 2, which is about the Enfield haunting in England, in just part of London, and Annabelle Comes Home, which is about the infamous Annabelle doll, which is a totally different looking doll for whatever reason in the Conjuring films than the actual Annabelle doll. And incidentally, all of these Conjuring films, or at least the four main Conjuring films, they are based on true stories of purportedly true hauntings, and often in them make reference to other hauntings. So that adds a little extra spice to them. But yeah, go watch The Conjuring. It's so good. My mother was visiting me. We went to see it. We watched it. We came home, and the next night it was like, let's go back. Let's go see it again. And we did. It was very spur of the moment. We just let's go. And we got in the car and we went and watched a 10 o'clock showing of it, 10 p.m. showing of it for our second viewing of the film. Paid full price and everything, because it was just gotta see that film again. But yeah, The Conjuring. Number 5 on the list. This one's a little different. This time we've got a rom-zom-com, as I believe it was marketed at the time, so a romantic zombie comedy. And that, of course, is Shaun of the Dead, from 2004, directed by Edgar Wright. And, starring, of course, Simon Pegg as Shaun, who lives a very boring, quiet life until essentially until a zombie apocalypse begins. And it takes him a while to notice it's happening, because he's kind of zombie-like, going through the motions of his very boring life. But when it takes off, it really, when he begins to notice things are really going wrong in England, or at least, in his neighborhood, and probably the whole country. This film, not that the film isn't great from start to finish, but it just, his life really changes. And in so many ways, it actually improves as a result of this zombie apocalypse that he finds himself at the center of and having to fight to survive. And, it's in so many ways, this is a very tongue-in-cheek film. It does absolutely have good, strong horror elements, but it is predominantly a comedy. But saying that, I know a few years ago, some friends and I watched it on Halloween just as a fun thing. And it was time for me to leave their house to go home. And as I was getting ready to walk out the door, it was like, I feel like I've got to be like pumped up and ready to like run to the car to get away from the zombies, is one of those kinds of films that you really do get into it. You really do sort of, yeah. So yeah, I won't say too much about it beyond what I've said. It's a British comedy, rom-com, as I say. It is, so it's got, English in particular place settings, supposed English sense of humor. As someone who's lived in a few countries, I've always struggled to figure out what is so English about this English sense of humor, because I've seen the things that are being called English in other places. It's one of those things. But the setting of it, the particulars of it, and in particular the idea that once they've survived this, they're all going to go and have a nice cup of tea. That's probably pretty English. But anyway, yeah, so, or at least pretty British, if not specifically English. But anyway, so yeah, if you're wanting something a lot of fun, a little bit of an edge, but I think probably watchable for at least most of the family, if not all of the family. Little kids might not be so great for this, but, this is a film that's probably more accessible across sensitivities and ages than the other films on this list. It's a lot of fun. So, Shaun of the Dead. All right, so I've chosen for this one A Quiet Place, Day One, from 2024, directed by Michael Sarnowski. I was a little conflicted about not putting A Quiet Place. The Quiet Place films are all excellent, and A Quiet Place is such a fantastic film, and such a different film in so many respects. Very little speaking in it, very little sound, everything, because of course everything has to be quiet. They have to, and the family at the center of it has the advantage of having a deaf child. So they are all fluent in American Sign Language, and that way they're able to communicate with one another quite easily, even in complete silence, and right from the beginning. And this gives them a major advantage in surviving what happens in these films. And I'll try not to say too much, though I think most people are aware that this is not paranormal or supernatural in the sort of ghostly ghouly sense, but rather in alien invasion sense, okay? Which some people count aliens as part of that sort of larger paranormal umbrella. I do kind of get that, but at the same time, I think, if we're using logic and statistics, there have to be other species on other planets out there in the universe. We cannot be the only sentient species in the universe. It's way too big. So there have to be other species. Ghosts and things like that, who knows? I believe in them. That doesn't mean everyone does. And there's room on both sides of that argument for, valid points. Aliens, I think you can't really call that paranormal. I think they do exist. Whether they've come here, where they're actually aliens, that's another question. But I think other species, sentient species on other planets definitely exist. But it's still a scary film. And that's why it's on the list. But I think the reason I chose A Quiet Place Day One is because we see in it those last hours and minutes before the invasion begins. And we see the characters experiencing and coming to grips with what is going to be their new reality. And this is it's quite a sad film in some ways. It has moments, of course, of levity. It has moments of joy in it, but it is also a really effective, really scary film, and it's one of those that, I think this is true in so many ways of the original A Quiet Place and this film, that you almost become afraid of making too much noise. Again, you get so into the film that, just as at the end of watching Shaun of the Dead, I was ready to like dash out to my car to get away from the zombies. This one, I suddenly found myself not wanting to make too much noise, because it's dangerous, at least in these films. So, yeah, just as this is, all of the Quiet Place films are great, but I've chosen A Quiet Place Day One because I like how we see this world happen. It's actually, I think, the third of the Quiet Place films, but yeah, go watch them all, but that's the one I'm signposting here, just because of how we see that new order imposed upon the survivors of the invasion. So now, number 6, It Follows, directed by David Robert Mitchell, from 2014. So it's, not an older film, but, one of those sort of slightly older-ish ones on this list. And a really, again, this is another one of these films that I didn't find it scary watching it. There were some, chilling or kind of, tense moments while you're watching it, but it wasn't, to me, particularly scary. I've shown this film in the past on a History of Hollywood Horror module that I taught for several years. And I actually let the students choose a film, and they chose this one, and I liked it well enough for what it was doing that I used it once or twice more in subsequent years. And it's one of these films that when you're watching it, personally, although some students found it scary, I didn't. But because of the nature of the film, it's like after watching the film, we had a break before the lecture, and you suddenly found yourself watching other people, particularly those that you knew, and sort of being like, are you real? And again, it's this one, the idea of it that follows you beyond the film itself, beyond the viewing of the film. The basic sort of premise for this film is that we follow a young woman. Jay is her name. She's played by Micah Monroe. I think that's how you say that name. And she has, so she has a kind of a one-night stand with this guy, and long story short, she finds out that it's almost like a metaphor for a venereal disease, an STD, that if you touch, or if you have sex with someone, you transfer from yourself to the person that you sleep with, this kind of curse, for lack of a better way to put it, where this sort of doppelganger, for it could be anyone you know, and it changes form, so it's a shapeshifter, will just start walking toward you, and if it touches you, you die. So obviously you don't want to be touched. Now, it doesn't run, it just walks, and it walks at a fairly sedate pace. So you think, well, that's easy enough to get away from, but it's a little bit more involved and a little bit cleverer than that. And she thinks, if I get in a car and drive far away, but somehow it suddenly is back. So it's attached to her, and in a spiritual way, and if it actually makes physical contact with her, she will die. And it's the sort of dilemma of, well, what do I do? Because if I sleep with someone, I'll transfer this on to them. I'll be okay. That's what was done to her, after all, and apparently was done to the guy that she had slept with before. So it's the, well, do I just pass it off on someone else? Do I trick them into this, have a one night stand with somebody and pass it on to him? Or do I deal with it myself? Can I deal with it myself? So there's all kinds of interesting sort of ideas, thought experiments, metaphors, and so forth behind this film. Plus, it is just really creepy. Really, really creepy. As I say, I didn't find it frightening as such, but it is definitely a film that stuck with me. Okay. So, number 8, The Witch, a New England folk tale directed by Robert Eggers from 2015. Such an interesting film. If you like your, sort of New England witch tales, this is definitely, obviously, a good one for you. My understanding is that a lot of the dialogue and indeed a lot of the sort of plot points from the film actually they were taken from testimony from various, the witch trials that happened in New England in the late 17th century. So, in the late 1600s. So kind of like, the Salem witch trials, but it was actually a much bigger thing than just Salem. It's actually a really complex topic. And I would, if that is of interest to you, there are definitely things you need to, books and even a very good podcast from Aaron Mahnke, that is worth having a look at in terms of the sort of deep dive into this history. But The Witch follows the story of a young girl, Thomasin, played by Anna Taylor-Joy, as her family, and apparently her father is even more Puritan than the Puritans. He's so hardcore that they're like, you're too strict even for us. And they exile Thomasin's family they exile her father, and his wife and children go with him, from the community, and they end up trying to start over again on land, on the edge of the forest, far from the community. We don't quite know how far, but you could travel back there within I think a couple of days, a day or two, but it's still far enough away that they are incredibly isolated where they are. And things begin to get strange in that very sort of late 17th century New England witch trials kind of way. There's a black goat that starts acting very odd. There's the creepy twin brother and sister. Thomasin's little brother, one of her, she has a brother and sister who are younger than her. They're the youngest in the family, and no, they're not the youngest. They're the second youngest. And they're twins, and they're weird, and they're mean, and but are they creepy? She has a slightly younger brother who is, there's a lack of girls. Really, it's just his sisters around him, and he starts sort of noticing Thomasin in a very inappropriate way. Nothing happens, but it suggests some, ick. And Thomasin's not like that. She doesn't at all, but the brother does. And then there's the literal baby of the family, an infant. And everything starts to go very, very wrong for the family when Thomasin is sort of looking after the baby, and she's playing sort of peekaboo with the baby, and she covers her eyes, and the baby's gone. And of course, unbeknownst to the family at this point, there is a witch living in the woods who steals the baby, and this is part of the sort of witch lore of this time. Of course, I'm sure, the idea of the witch flying on a broomstick. Well, how do they make that broomstick fly, you ask? Part of the spell involves using the fat of an infant to coat the broom. I think you have to you butcher and render the infant and use the fat to coat your broomstick with that. And more to it than that, I think, spells and enchantments, but they need that infant's fat to allow the broom to fly. It's really disgusting. It's really gross, but you don't see all of that, but you do see hints of that. I think if you know the lore, you know what's going on. If you don't, that might be a tad, it's disturbing, but you're not quite sure what you're seeing. So yeah. And effectively, this is the story of how Thomasin becomes a witch. And she's not a witch when they begin accusing her of being one. Her own family, her own parents. But by the end, yeah, which I guess is kind of spoiling it a bit, but there are things that indicate it throughout the film. I will say the dialogue is that sort of late 17th century version of sort of early-ish modern English. The language is still evolving. So while you can understand what's being said, you absolutely can, it takes a little bit of time to get into the rhythm of it if you're not familiar with the way people spoke in this period. So, and as I say, a lot of the dialogue does come from, sort of letters, transcripts from trials, things like that. So it is very old-fashioned English. But it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And I think the fact that they do that really does help bring you into the mindset of these people in a way that if they anachronistically spoke like a modern, sort of 21st century person, it wouldn't. Okay. It wouldn't be as creepy. There's just something inherently uncanny, inherently other right from the off because of just language, let alone everything else. So this one's a teeny bit more work, but it's very worth it. And it is a creepy film. And the ending of it, I won't say too much about it other than that the ending has been interpreted in lots of different ways. There's a smattering of controversy, I guess is a way to put it, about how the film ends. I loved the ending of the film. I found it, shall we say, very uplifting. And if you've seen the film, you know why I'm like. But yeah, The Witch, a New England folktale. Go and see it. All right, number 9. Another entry from Jordan Peele. This time his 2019 film, Us. A number of the films I've talked about, a couple of the films anyway, have made reference to doppelgangers and so forth. And of course, Us absolutely does this. Strange things start happening. These odd individuals can suddenly be seen sort of staring, lurking around. And Adelaide, the central character of the film, was a wife and mother. Her husband, her children start realizing something terrible is happening, and they're getting these sort of sustained attacks. I don't want to say too much more than that, from these odd figures who are sort of start stalking them and sort of follow them back to, follow them home, as it were, and try to invade the house, try to do something. And we start seeing this is happening in other places, that people are being attacked, and there's this sort of odd weirdness happening. And gosh, this is a really hard one to talk about that's not going to spoil it. All I'll say is it's intensely clever. It has one hell of a twist. And doppelgangers, again, play an incredibly important part in it. Oh, wow. I think I almost, if I hadn't just started talking about it on the list. I might have left it off the list just because it's impossible to talk about without spoiling it. Um, it is, I mean, let's put it this way. Of Jordan Peele's films that I've mentioned on here, so Get Out and Us. Get Out is absolutely a fabulous film. Absolutely adore it. Us is way more tense and creepy in a lot of ways. Which is not to say that Get Out isn't. But the terror in Get Out is shorter lived for all that it has larger implications. At least for the main character. What's going on in Us has been taking place for decades, possibly forever. And it's about this kind of, these two parallel worlds, effectively. I don't know. I think I'm really talking about it very badly. I'm just going to stop because I want you to see this film. You will absolutely not regret it. But if you're really extra super duper creeped out, you might want to watch it during the day. Watch it with a friend. Somebody who'll be staying with you that night. Yeah. Maybe on a Sunday morning or Saturday morning so that you can, have the rest of the day to go through to kind of take the edge off. This is a creepy, creepy film. And as in some ways it's quite a sad film. There's some humor, there's some levity, but there's a lot of just weirdness about it, but in the best possible way. I'm just going to stop. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to move on. But yeah, Us. You'll never look at red jumpsuits the same. All right. Number 10, Devil. Directed by John Eric Dowdle, I think is how you say it. Apologies if not. From 2010. Now, this is another one of those films, and this is actually a fairly short film. It's just over an hour long, and it was produced by M. Night Shyamalan, effectively on the grounds of this was a film that when he read the plot and read the screenplay and all for it, he wished he could do this. He wished he had come up with this film, that it was so good. And, when M. Night Shyamalan was at his best, boy, was he at his best. Boy, was it amazing. When M. Night Shyamalan was at his best, wow, was he good. By the time we get to 2010, he's no longer at his best, unfortunately. I take no pleasure in saying that. But when he helped bring this film to us, he did us a great turn. Like I say, it's a fairly short film. It's kind of one of these sort of locked room mystery type things, but with a supernatural twist. A group of people are trapped in a lift, in an elevator, and they come to realize that one amongst them, but they don't know who because they all look like normal people, one of them is the devil. And it's figuring out who is the devil and how to get out. It is a matter of survival. And it's the first time I saw it, I watched the whole thing and then immediately rewatched it. Like literally, the film ended. I quickly ran and, refreshed myself, as it were, sat down and watched it again. So there was maybe 5 minutes between finishing it and rewatching it, or starting the rewatch of it. And it was a totally different film. And it was so tense. It was so clever. And, when you rewatch it, the things that you pick up about the characters, about the situation that they find themselves in, it's so good. It's so clever. So yeah, I won't say anything more than that because I really do not want to spoil it. I'll just leave it at that. Devil. 2010. Great film. Number 11. Um, this film is not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, but I have always loved it, and that is the film 1408 from 2007, directed by Michael Hafström. And I'm sure I have said that name incorrectly, but that's the best I can do. Stars, of course, John Cusack, based on a Stephen King story. It's like the horror version in a sense of it's like the horror version of Groundhog Day in a weird way. Not exactly. That's not the best way to put it, maybe, but it has elements of that. So basically, this guy makes a living writing and publishing books about hauntings, and he goes to this hotel in New York City, quite a fancy, elegant, but not famous, very famous hotel, because he's heard about the haunted room. And, eventually after this really, interesting and very expositional conversation that he has with the hotel's manager. The manager's played by Samuel L. Jackson, and it's just a small part, but he's fabulous in it. He persuades the manager to let him stay and write about room 1408. This is a room that is kept locked off. They take care of it. It's all maintained. It could be stayed in terms of cleanliness and readiness, but they never put people in there anymore because it has never ended well. Terrible things have happened. People have, died and so forth, and beyond the sort of normal statistics. And that's part of the conversation that John Cusack's character, Mike, has with the manager, is that, the manager's able to point out that, statistically, this number of people die, this number of people have heart attacks, strokes, all this kind of stuff in a hotel, but this room goes way beyond the sort of statistical norms, that this is a genuinely dangerous room, and they've just decided, you know what, not worth renting it out. We'd rather lose the money and just not go through the hassle. But Mike is able to persuade the manager to let him stay in the room so that he can write about it. And Mike, we find out he has reasons to want to believe in ghosts, in, so the supernatural and all that, but he doesn't. And he's tried again and again and again to find proof, and he has not. And his belief is, just like every other sort of supposedly haunted inn or whatever, that he's going to go there, he's going to spend the night, nothing's going to happen, and he'll just write something about it for his upcoming book that he's compiling. Doesn't go that way. He does get his proof at last. And effectively what happens is things get more and more and more and more horrible, and then it resets, and he goes through it again and again, kind of like, as I say, Bill Murray's character in Groundhog Day, but it's dangerous, it's terrifying, it's a really violent, disturbing, malevolent haunting, as if there's just something wrong with the room. It doesn't even seem to be that there's a particular individual ghost or whatever that's causing all this. It is a bad, evil, rotten room. Why just this one room in this whole hotel? Don't know, but it is. And the clock radio will come on, and that we know that things are restarting when, or starting, and then of course later restarting when it plays that song, "We've Only Just Begun," and it takes that song and turns it into something wonderfully creepy, and it's telling the truth. That room has only just begun to work its terrible magic, its horror on poor old Mike. And in a sense, there's a kind of hopefulness in the film in that he does get the thing he's been seeking, proof of the supernatural. And I don't think I'm really spoiling anything with that, because very early, going into it, we know this is gonna be the time, this is gonna be the place when Mike is gonna learn that the supernatural is real, that ghosts are real. And that's something he needs, he desperately needs to be able to believe in, and hasn't been until now. So in a way, that's, there's a kind of hopefulness there. On the other hand, this is a deeply disturbing, and I think, especially if you catch it in just the right mood, even I found this really creepy and kind of frightening. So given my threshold, hopefully you'll find it very frightening too. But yeah, 1408, directed by, as I say, Michael Hafstrom, from 2007, based on a Stephen King story. Go see it. Number 12. A real classic here. And speaking, as I was a little bit ago, of M. Night Shyamalan, have to bring in The Sixth Sense from 1999. This is the film with the, I see dead people. This is where that comes from. If you weren't sure, if you didn't know, I don't know how that's possible, but if that's you, now you know. The I see dead people comes from The Sixth Sense. And this is it's one of these films that when you watch it again, there's so many things that slot into place that didn't quite the first time you watched it, because when you get the twist, and the twist is not that the kid, the little boy, can see dead people. The big twist of the film, and we're still within my sort of 30-year moratorium, so I'm not going to spoil it. But I will say, and I'm sure most of you probably do, who are watching this probably have seen it. It's a classic film. For all that it isn't quite 30 years old, it was a classic almost from the beginning of its release. When you get the twist, you understand pretty much everything you've seen in that film in an entirely different way. The story, of course, revolves around a child psychiatrist, played by Bruce Willis, who his entire career has been about helping troubled children, children who have particularly difficult sort of psychological situations and issues. And he begins working with a little boy in Philadelphia, where the story is set, and where Bruce Willis lives. And, he's trying to figure out what's going on with this kid. And meanwhile, he's feeling more and more distant from his, in his own life, he's feeling more and more distant from his wife. They don't really speak. They're like strangers, She's clearly going through quite a lot. He doesn't fully understand what's going on with them, but it's of concern to him, and he's trying to figure out how to work this out, while at the same time becoming more and more concerned about this boy, who reminds him of a patient he had, years previously. And then he's talking with the little boy one evening, and it's like, okay, the boy's finally ready to tell him, I'm finally ready to tell you what's, my secret. I see dead people. And, the child turns out to be psychic and can easily see ghosts. And he sees ghosts all around him all the time. They are drawn to him because of his ability. So he'll see ghosts in his home. He sees ghosts at school, out on the street, just about everywhere he goes, he sees ghosts, dead people. And most of the time, they are terribly frightening. And the child is constantly, either in a sort of maintaining a persistent state of low-key terror, punctuated with absolute, utter, sort of visceral terror. And, Bruce Willis is trying to help him. and he isn't sure that he believes the child, but he at least believes that the child believes this and is trying to figure out a way to help him. And yeah, it all goes on from there. So I won't give the twist. I will say that this is yet another one of the films on this list that if you watch it again, you are very rewarded for it, because you understand the film entirely differently if you don't know the twist going into it. I think even if you do kind of know the twist the first time you're watching it, because you've heard it, because as I say, this is a 27-year-old film now. It's from 1999. It is a classic. It is a much memed film, of course, particularly the I see dead people thing. So you may well know the twist. I'm not saying just in case, but even if you do already know it, you'll still be able to watch and enjoy the film. So, The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan, 1999, and this is absolutely Shyamalan at his best. And last but not least, number 13. Now, this is a little bit different, this film. It's called Lights Out. And no, this is not the sort of feature film Lights Out. This is an extremely short film. It is a 2-minute and 41-second horror film, directed by David Sandberg, and it was released in 2013. The longer version, Lights Out, is from 2016, so this is a different film. I've only seen little bits of that. It didn't grab me, but the 2-minute, 41-second 2013 film, Lights Out, wow, is it creepy. Maybe it's because I'm a woman living alone, and the main, the character of the film, the only character in the film, is a woman who seems to be living on her own. Who knows if that's what it is. But I've shown this film to students in the past, I think probably beginning in 2013, when I stumbled upon this film, or 2014 at the latest, and scared the out of these students. Try not to swear because, but definitely it is a scary film. It's so short, and you think, how scary can a not even 3-minute long film be? The answer is freaking scary. It plays upon, I think this is true in some ways of a lot of these films. Good horror plays upon childhood fears. This is something a number of people, famously, for instance, Stephen King, in his books on horror, particularly I think Danse Macabre, talks about that great horror plays upon childhood fears. It takes the things we're already afraid of and pulls them out. This is also something Wes Craven, the famous horror film director, once said, that horror films don't create fear, they release it. Well, it's the same idea. This is playing upon fear of the dark. It's playing upon, as a famous meme out there says, you're not afraid of the dark. You're not afraid of being alone in the dark. You're afraid of not being alone in the dark. Okay, so this is that kind of a film. There's no narrative as such. There's a story. Something happens, of course, in the film, but there's no sort of drawn out narrative. It's too short for that. No, it's not too short, but it's very short. But you don't need a narrative because you get everything you need in terms of thrills, chills, and so forth. Honestly, and I love all the other 12 films that I've talked about, I'm going to say this is the scariest one on the list. It's, a short, sharp shock that really, to use another cliche, pulls no punches. It is scary. It is available on YouTube. I will put the link in the description below so that you can go and watch it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Okay? Lights Out, 2013, directed by David Sandberg. So, that's all. Those are the films that I would cite as my current favorite modern horror films. A list of 13. Why not? And yeah, so that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you again next week, probably for a book review. I'm not quite done reading the book that I was hoping to review for this week. Just cold and you know, being sad. I was going to sit and read on Wednesday evening, and then Dolly Parton died, and I didn't read except about Dolly and watch things about Dolly, and it was all very sad. I adored Dolly Parton. So yeah, that kind of got in the way of my reading. But I will have it finished and a review and all for next week, come hell or high water. And but yeah, that's all for now. Have a great evening. If you're watching this in the evening, of course, have a great week. And I will see you again next week for a new episode. Bye.